A very good morning to you if you're watching us on Facebook. It's 11:55 here in London. We're outside Buckingham Palace. We're covering President Trump's royal state visit, second day, in fact. It's a business day today. Yesterday was all about the pomp, about the pageantry. Today, a lot of business at hand, but also we're expecting protests. We've got a panel here. And the question we're asking today, Trump in the UK, is the special relationship at risk? I mean, some of the faces that you recognise, we've got on the far right, we've got Ian Dale.
Beg your pardon, far right?
Well, here we go again, the far right, as I said before. Linda Hugh and George Pascoe-Watson.
I'm in the centre.
You're in the centre, this is good. Right. Yesterday, very much was all about the pomp, was all about pageantry, of course. Trump would have loved that, isn't it? That special treatment he had gotten. Today, though, attention's all going to be on the business, a trade deal, Huawei potentially, and this relationship. What do you think will come out of this, if anything, George?
Well, the critical thing here is that the Trump leaves the scene after today without having broken too many eggs and tried to advance the special relationship in some way. Listen, let's be clear. The Prime Minister of the UK basically ends her job this Sunday. She's nothing more than a caretaker now, and I don't expect there to be any breakthroughs of meaning. But I think that the special relationship is bigger than the two of them, and it matters how the Trump sort of regime, if you like, comes through London and what mood it leaves. Yeah. Obviously, the news is going to be dominated by an unyet seen protest and demonstrations. That will be the big news item of the day.
That started about an hour or so ago. We'll keep an eye on this. But like you said, Theresa May stepping down on Friday. We heard from President Trump also about 2 hours ago. We expect very, very, very substantive trade deal, Linda. We think this is possible. What can the US get out of this?
I think the U.S. is going to want everything on the table in terms of a trade deal. So everything from the NHS to agriculture. I think the British government is going to want something much more tailored around services, financial services, professional services. Whether the two will meet, I'm not entirely sure, especially because, as George said, the Prime Minister is only a caretaker. So one of the striking things about the events today is he's going to have meetings, apparently, with Jeremy Hunt, the Foreign Secretary. He had a business roundtable this morning.
He did, indeed.
So it's about trying to put out, I think, what the American side wants and then getting a broader reaction than just from the Prime Minister, which is why I don't think they're going to end up with anything concrete today. The official line, he said, will be, we can't do a trade deal with Britain until its relationship with the EU is clear. Yeah. So therefore, this is not a setback. This is just about feelers and sending out what it is that we want. But let's not forget, bilateral trade deals take a long time, even if it's narrow. And the US is a powerful country. For Britain to negotiate against that is always going to be a challenge.
But like you said, Linda, you know, Theresa May stepping down on Friday, no doubt President Trump will be looking over her shoulder at the next potential leader. So we don't know at this stage whether he's meeting Ian with any of the 13 potential candidates, I'm guessing with his friends. He said he wanted to perhaps meet with Boris Johnson, who's a friend, Nigel Farage. So where does this leave this friendship, this relationship?
Well, I cringe every time I hear the phrase special relationship. I think many people do, because it's special when it means something to one of the countries. It's not special when one of the countries disagrees with the other, and that happens actually more often than people think. There is a different relationship between Britain and America and other countries, and that's why I think Donald Trump will probably meet some of the politicians that are taking part in this leadership race. As you say, he's meeting the Foreign Secretary. He got the endorsement of the International Trade Secretary, Liam Fox, today, so he's a player. Boris Johnson, we know the relationship there. He may meet Michael Gove, the Environment Secretary, who, in my view, is one of the leading candidates to take over from Theresa May. So I don't think this should be seen as Donald Trump interfering in British politics. I think it ought to be seen as him trying to get to know who Theresa May's likely successor is. That's what diplomacy is all about.
All right, we'll talk about this special relationship, how special it actually is, when we just start the programme in about 5 seconds or so. It is midday here in London. We're coming to you live from outside Buckingham Palace. After the pomp and the pageantry, today is about politics and possibly about protests. On Monday, Donald Trump's visit to the UK was all about the pomp and the ceremony.
I'm confident that our common values and shared interests will continue to unite us.
Thank you for your warm welcome.
Today, he gets down to business.
The U.S. president and his British hosts are trying to balance that special relationship between the two countries.
Donald Trump will meet with Prime Minister Theresa May just days before she steps down.
What gets discussed later behind closed doors here could potentially be of broader concern.
This is a point seized on by London's mayor, who wrote in an email that Trump is not just here to spread his hateful views and tweet childish insults, but to make a UK-US trade deal that would force Britain to agree to anything he wants.
We don't agree with, for example, his approach to climate change or the Iran nuclear deal.
I don't want to sort of predict anything because it's Donald Trump and we're talking about politics. Who knows what will happen?
This will also be the day for massive protests in London. The Trump baby balloon will make a return.
Say it loud! Say it clear!
So we want to hear from you. Send us your thoughts, your comments. Trump in the UK. Is the special relationship at risk? We have a panel here with me, some very familiar faces. We've got Ian Dale, we've got Linda Hugh, George Pascoe Watson. Send us your comments. Let us know also where you are writing from so we get a sense of really how much we're being seen across the world and the views from where you are. I want to get some of the comments very quickly. Jeff Murphy, the relationship is improving by the hour. Ignore the protesters, balloons, and London's mayor. Stick to business. Give Trump the royal treatment and all be well from Hong Kong. What special relationship, says Ulf Sadden? No significant agreement made so far. Let me give you a sense, though, of what we can expect. Well, yesterday, as you heard me say, was really about the pageantry. Today, a lot of business with President Trump as well for Theresa May. Donald Trump has a very packed schedule events in the British capital. Here's a look at his movements for today. This is day 2. The US president began the day at St. James's Palace for a business roundtable session with Prime Minister Theresa May. Mr. Trump then moved to 10 Downing Street, where meeting with May is underway right now. He'll also visit the Foreign Office and the historic Churchill War Rooms. Later, Trump moves to Winfield House, the US ambassador's residence, where Prince Charles and his wife will join the president for dinner. And I want to show you some live pictures from out of Downing Street. This is where, of course, the president, the last hour, I apologize, not live pictures that we have coming to you from Downing Street. You saw president arrive to meet Theresa May. This one's in the last hour or so. This is where they're having that one-on-one meeting there. So that's still ongoing. If there's more developments, of course, within the hour, we shall bring it to you. We're also keeping an eye on protests that are taking place here in London. We'll bring those to you within the half hour. Ian, let me start with you, because in our Facebook break just before we came onto the show, you were telling me that you don't like the term, the special relationship. Why not?
I don't think many people like the term. I just cringe. It seems to be almost a subservient term, as though we're always craving America's approval for everything we do. There is a distinct relationship between Britain and America through the obvious historical ties. And, of course, this week we are commemorating the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings, where Britain and America and Canada and other Commonwealth countries came together. But there have been incidents over the years. We think of the Suez Crisis. We think of all sorts of things, where the invasion of Grenada, when the British government and the American government have not seen eye to eye. It's not a relationship of equals, clearly. America is now the world's only superpower. However, I think that some people believe that Britain just has to sort of seek America's approval for everything it does. We are an independent nation, and if we disagree with them, and this is where I'm sure we'll come on to the possibility of a trade deal. We don't have to bow to America's demands on a trade deal. A trade deal is something that two countries come together and agree upon. There are heavy negotiations, but in the end, you either want an agreement or you don't.
Do you think, George, that the UK will bow down to the US? Do you agree with that? Well,
the first thing I want to say is I disagree with Ian.
I saw you rolling your eyes.
I absolutely disagree with Ian. I do think the special relationship exists, and it means something. And what it means is we treat each other in ways that we perhaps wouldn't treat other partners.
But is it balance? balanced?
It doesn't have to be balanced. Everybody's balance is different. What matters is that they will do things for us that they wouldn't do for others. We will do things for them that we wouldn't do for others. And in security and in trade, 1 million people in this country, the UK, every morning get up and go to work for American companies. There is trade already existing. Do I think...
You can say that about a lot of European countries too.
Not at that scale, I can't.
20% of
and
our
a lot of the companies that I represent are American companies as well, and I understand only too well the impact that they have in research and development and employment and all sorts of economic goods. Do I think that we have to bow to America's demands to get a trade deal? No, I don't. I mean, I think in any negotiated situation, we have to find ways of finding an accommodation. I don't think we would have to, if you like, open up the NHS to the accusation of privatization. By the way, some very, very great American companies are already working here in the NHS. And to great... It's not a fear, it's a great thing. Patients every day are getting some of the best treatments because of these companies being in this country. I think it's a great thing. On chlorified chicken and I think hormone-injected beef, I think these things will be sorted out. But I think what critically matters is that, don't forget, Theresa May and Donald Trump are the custodians for this time in history of this relationship. And at some time, they will both be gone and others will take over.
I don't think we're disagreeing, really. I just don't like the term.
Right. Well,
I mean, the substance, I agree with you on.
Yes, but it's just that, Linda, on this special relationship, does it need to be balanced? Is it special?
I think it's special because of history and culture.
Yeah.
And the question is, will there be a divergence from that as to where the United States is heading at the moment? So one of the symbolic gifts that Theresa May has given President Trump is a Second World War volume, an original by Winston Churchill, essentially celebrating the liberal world order, the partnership between America and Britain, not just through those war times, but actually in handing off from being, when Britain was the most powerful country in the world, to America, a very cooperative kind of handoff. So I think it's that shared history that makes it, if Ian doesn't like the term special, we'll use another term, that makes it unlike any others.
Together.
Yeah, but I think the challenge is that President Trump and the U.S. administration is very much not for a multilateral world order. America first, his signature policy is about putting America first. He's already, for instance, pushed bilateral trade agreements. He's very critical of the multilateral trading system, the multilateral NATO security arrangements.
So to me, that's against a global Britain post-Brexit.
Exactly. So that, to me, is where the clash is going to be. And all relationships, as we know, you have to work at it. Just because you've had one doesn't mean it'll continue.
As we're talking here, we're seeing live pictures coming to you from central London, Trafalgar Square. The protests have started at 11 o'clock, about an hour or so. These are anti-Trump protests. We've also heard in the last hour or so from Sadiq Khan. He had a bit of a spat between himself and President Trump. He wrote an article over the weekend, really criticizing President Trump, saying we shouldn't be rolling out the red carpet. Then Trump hit back. And this is what Sadiq Khan has told our chief international correspondent, Clarissa Ward. Take a listen.
Even in my own country and in America, dare I say it, you've got people whose views I find abhorrent, whose views are complete opposite of our values in this country, who, see Donald Trump as their champion. I think it's wrong, for example, to defend white supremacists and neo-Nazis and, those who are anti-Semites. I think it's wrong to amplify the tweets from racists in this country as Donald Trump has done so. I think it's wrong, by the way, to separate children from their parents on a border. I think it's wrong to ban people from coming to your country because of the faith they belong to. I think it's wrong to roll back the progress that's been made on the reproductive rights of women or LGBT plus rights.
Sadiq Khan speaking to CNN. We'll hear today as well from opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn, who will be taking part in those protests, who boycotted the banquet yesterday and will be speaking at the protest. I want to get you to, if you have time, if you want to chip in, so your comments or your thoughts on this discussion. I'm going to read some of your thoughts. Miguel Batista, at risk? I doubt it, talking about the relationship. There's too much corporate interest propping the special relationship up for it to fail. El Mehdi says it's a shame to protest the leader of the free world. Lorraine, Britain has common values with the United States, not with Trump. Hi from Tokyo, special question mark, only when it feels special for Trump. And Jackie, I'm horrified that Trump gets this treatment. More power to Sadiq Khan. Ian.
Some of those comments are quite interesting because, of course, if you watch House of Cards, remember Francis Underwood once said, "Nothing is forever." When we talk about the special relationship, that is, I think, forever. And the people who are leading the British government at the moment and will lead the British government, their job is to protect that for the future. Now, Donald Trump isn't going to always be there.
Yeah.
I think, is an aberration in American politics, and I suspect whoever succeeds him will be almost the direct opposite of Donald Trump. But I think you've got British politicians who actually ought to know better today. You've got Sadiq Khan there, Mayor of London, who wrote an article in the Sunday newspaper which was deliberately designed to insult Donald Trump as far as he possibly could. And so, hey, what a surprise, Donald Trump replies with his tweets. I mean, he went over the top, but I don't blame him for replying in many ways. You have Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition, going to speak just down the road at this demonstration in Parliament Square today. Now, what signal does that send, not just to the President of the United States, but to everyone else in America, about the future relationship between America and Britain if he becomes Prime Minister? Jeremy Corbyn believes that America is at the root of all evil in the world. He is advised by communists. I mean, his chief advisor is known as a Stalinist. Most of the people demonstrating, I would just walk past them in Trafalgar Square, they've all got their Socialist Worker Party placards all handed to them. This is a Trotskyite organisation. These people do not represent ordinary British people. They're far left. And I think we have to call them out for what they are. That's not to say that a lot of normal British people don't particularly like Donald Trump. Yeah. I completely get that. But this demonstration is not representative of the country.
There was some... I spoke to the lady that was organising the Trump blimp earlier in the show. She said there were women protesting against Donald Trump. There was some for climate change. So it's varied protests there. You're seeing some live images.
Yeah, but the problem is... The people who are genuinely there for climate change reasons, or perhaps because they think he's a bit vulgar, or whatever it might be, will be, as Ian rightly says, wrapped into a far more aggressive, hardcore, extremist position, which does not represent Britain. And it's important that CNN viewers around the world know that they don't represent the British view. And that is a worry. But I do think it's also right that we have a good tradition in this country where people can protest. And Sadiq Khan's point... and not that I'm his supporter necessarily, but his point is he sees around the world a lurch, if you like, to the far right. That's what he's worried about, and he thinks that anybody who is encouraging that should be in some way toned down or brought to heel. If he can do anything, he wants to do it. That's why he took the decision he took. He also took it because he's got an election to run.
Absolutely.
And he is aligning himself with Greens and Liberal Democrats here in London as he fights a London mayoral election.
Let me show you some of the newspapers. If we take today's Daily Mail, Stephanie, if possible, the headline there, the winners and stone cold losers, if we can bring it up. There you go. You have Corbyn there on your screen, as well as Sadiq Khan, we heard from just in the last few minutes. And then the Daily Express front page. Here's to the end of EU shackles. This, of course, following on from what we heard from President Trump. His tweet from Monday, if we can bring that up, our viewers get a sense of where that's coming from. He said, London part of the trip is going very well, really well. The Queen and the entire royal family have been fantastic. The relationship with the United Kingdom is very strong. Tremendous crowds of well-wishers and people that love our country. I was here, there weren't that tremendous, the crowds. I have to just clarify that. Haven't seen any protests yet, but I'm sure the fake news will be working hard to find them. Great love all around. Also, big trade deals possible once UK gets rid of the shackles. Already starting to talk. And actually, we heard from him in the last hour and a half or so that Linda talking about this trade deal. And I want to hone in on this trade deal because this is important. I was reading a fascinating article today in the FT, and not just the FT, the Telegraph as well. Quite a few newspapers today are focusing on this potential trade deal, that it won't be balanced. In many ways, the president will be pushing a hard bargain, as you can expect from any president, correct?
Yes, but this one particularly, because I think some presidents might have more of a multilateral view. So any trade deal you do between two countries, which are part of the World Trade Organization, you're normally cognizant of what that means for all the other countries in the world. But President Trump is very much a bilateral art of the deal, his book, a kind of negotiator. In fact, one of the reports said, even if the deal was pretty good for Britain as well as for the US, which is how all trade deals really should be, you lose some, but overall you gain some. Apparently, we're not allowed to describe it as being a win for Britain because that would be that would offend the American president.
So at the time of 2020, just
yeah.
preparation.
So there's a bit of, I think, politicking, obviously, on top of that. But I think the main issue is going to be America is the world's most powerful country. They're going to want a comprehensive free trade agreement, the kind of thing that covers all the sectors of interest to their company.
Yeah.
So access to the National Health Service. There's going to be issues over agriculture. And the British government is going to be much more interested in something that's narrower, which is around services. And that's because America and Britain are both services economies. This is an area that Britain could do well if it accessed the US market more freely than now. So you already have, I think, very different starting positions. And let's not forget one more thing. Britain has negotiated a free trade agreement since 1975. The USTR, the US Trade Representative, has about 200 negotiators. They're widely acknowledged to be the best in the world in terms of what they're able to do. So I think in that sense, it's not just an imbalance in power, it's also expertise as Britain sort of, but let's not forget, America is a massive trading partner of the UK. So single biggest trading partner if you separate the EU out into separate countries.
Yes.
And you know, going for one, which makes sense both to the structure of the economy, a lot of reasons why they should be talking, but I doubt they'll come up with anything because they need to know what the UK-EU relationship be after Brexit before
that was going to be my next point, because it's not a question of one replacing the other. No. The UK surely will need both. We can bring up the graphic just highlighting the imports and exports between the UK and the US, as well as the UK between the EU. President Trump said at the weekend that we have tremendous potential to make up more than the difference. This is in the interview he gave to the Sunday Times. As you can see, the EU is the biggest, in terms of imports and exports, it has a higher percentage. So I'm sure President Trump will try peel away the UK from the EU, but the reality is the UK needs the EU almost much more than it does the US. Well, go ahead, Ian.
That's the wrong way to look at it, because the EU is a declining market. If you look at percentages, the rest of the world is, I mean, that is where we need to be looking. The US, I don't know quite how that figure's worked out, 15.7%. I understand 20% of our exports already go to the US without a free trade agreement. So there's massive expansion possibilities there if we have a free trade agreement. I agree with Linda, it's not going to be easy. No trade agreement is ever easy. But the US and Australia negotiated one in 15 months. Now, OK, Australia, not quite the size of our economy, but we are the world's 5th largest economy. The US is the world's 1st largest economy. So we should not go into these negotiations thinking, oh, well, we'll have to give away on this, that and the other. That's the mistake we made already in the EU negotiations, where we're afraid to offend the EU, so we give away at the first hurdle. That's not how you negotiate with the Americans, in my view. I think we will be able to do a deal. I don't think it's going to be very quick, because you're right. We need to see what our trading relationship is going to be with the EU. Hopefully that will become much clearer in the next few months. But then we can really get cracking. And again, I accept your point. We haven't had our own trade negotiators for such a long time, but they have actually had 3 years to work this out now, and they have been recruiting people.
And also the other point to bear in mind is, you know, why is it that President Trump is here with his entire family and friends? The reason is because it's a big deal for him. This matters to him. When we talk about a special relationship, it's not a one-way street.
It matters for him economically, politically.
It matters for him in terms of his brand, number one, and he is all about brand. It matters to him a bit economically. There's definitely, Britain has a big and important role to play in American economy and American society and its place in the world. But also it matters, I think, culturally as well. And for these reasons, Trump is not just able to be completely dominant. He cares about here, otherwise he wouldn't have shown so much adoration and support yesterday.
He is half British, let's remember.
He is. Scottish, in fact.
But the stats that I was looking at a trade deal will only actually increase UK GDP by 0.2%, just a US trade deal, so not that significant of a boost. OK, we're going to take a very quick break. We'll continue this discussion on Facebook. Do continue to send us your comments. We'll read them out after in about a minute or so. Do stay right here with CNN. read some comments for you. Jessica Lancaster agreed that Trump himself is the risk. Jeff, Linda's very wise. There you go.
Oh, thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Pay you later.
Juice Schutten, the worry if UK is not Trump, it is Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage. Maureen Khan represents what most of the British think about Trump. Fred, I love Trump because he's in everything. He puts America first. Watching from Liberia. And then John, a special relationship, more like an abusive relationship. And we can talk about this after the break.
What evidence is there that there's an abusive relationship?
I think it's this idea that following on from the weekend, the NHS is going to be on the table, that agriculture it might be privatised. I think
well, it's ridiculous.
It's totally ridiculous.
It came out of the US ambassadors.
We have American companies involved in our healthcare at the moment, and they do a very fine job too. The amount of the NHS that is handled from the private sector is around 5%. Now, that has increased from 4% over the last 10 years. If anyone thinks that is going to increase to 50% or 70%, they're deluding themselves.
Well, even more importantly, I don't really care. What I care about is that healthcare is good in this country, and it doesn't really matter what the source is.
Well, we'll talk about this in the actual show, because I think it's really important.
And I'm hoping this rain might dampen the protests.
I don't know how we're doing, but we'll continue this discussion, actually, about that NHS point. Welcome back to CNN Talk. Thank you for sending us your comment. Keep them coming. Is a special relationship at risk between the UK and the US? Let me read some of them. Charles Anthony can't start it at all when he criticised the visiting president. Rehan Kyle, special relation between the UK and US is essential, but not with Trump. Austin, the relationship is a bond between the US and UK, not UK and Trump. What an awesome visit so far, says Tamara. I love our president. No relationships anymore. It's America first and Brexit, splendid isolation. Does Dennis have a point?
Well, I don't know that we are in splendid isolation. I think what's happening is we in Britain are reordering our role in the world, and I think absolutely right. I think it's appropriate to do that, because things shouldn't stay the same. Where you see opportunity and advantage, you should take it. Part of that is engaging with the United States president, whoever he or she might be, and that's important.
Ian, when you what does a post-Brexit global Britain against a US president's very much America first? That's a challenge, is it not?
I don't look at it that way. I don't see it as Britain against an American president who's America first. Surely any world leader considers their own country first. Is that really so unusual? No world leader is going to act against the interests of their own country. That would be rather weird. And this idea that Britain is going to be in some sort of splendid isolation, do we think that Japan is in splendid isolation? Do we think that Australia is in splendid isolation? They're not members of the EU. We do not need to be members of the EU to thrive. And this isn't to say that we're cutting off all ties with the EU. Of course we're not. I don't expect trade with the EU to diminish at all after Brexit.
Is there a feeling, though, here that that the UK is almost on its knees begging for a trade deal, and the fear of the UK being a poodle to the US?
I think there's probably some who think because the UK wants to show that it can do trade deals and big ones outside the EU, there might be a temptation to give away the house. But I would say that no sensible person goes to the negotiating table and says, that. In fact, I think why Britain and the US, it makes sense to do a trade deal, even though normally, by the way, you wouldn't do a trade deal with a major economy first. You would do a smaller country, learn from that, and then do a major economy. But it might make sense because, remember, there was a previous trade agreement called TTIP between the US and EU, which is now not progressing. That was mostly around services. And the UK had already put in quite a lot of effort as part of the EU team to negotiate this with the US. So if you think about the UK economy is 80% services. America's very similar, slightly maybe larger in terms of manufacturing, but just a touch. Biggest exporter of services in the world is the United States. Biggest exporter of services, second biggest, is the UK. So there's a lot of reasons why opening up markets further wouldn't be that difficult, because there's already regulatory agreement on both sides and respect and trust. So that would be the only reason to do this. But as we were saying a moment ago, I don't think that's the U.S.'s starting position, even though you can see why this may mean you could actually do a trade deal with the US.
From some of the comments, it's almost the feeling that the U.S. cannot be trusted, especially when you look at the Mexico-Canada deal, now tariffs out of Mexico. whoever becomes the next prime minister, they will also have to have a very hard bargain with the United States, because there's a very huge difference on the questions of Huawei, Iran, climate change.
Yeah. But the way we're going around this discussion suggests that we should be super nervous about it and we're not competent and we don't have the ability to stand up for ourselves. You know, people get real, you know. This is a change in the world order, and it's right that Britain is partly driving this and are in the spearhead. We are clear about the things that we want to get. Negotiation is going to be hard, and that's the way of the future. EU countries are looking at us right now and saying, how are they getting on? Because if they begin to thrive, we want the same.
Ian, final thought?
I think a lot of people thought that as soon as the Brexit vote happened, the UK economy was going to tank, we'd all be going to hell in a handcart. Well, that just has not happened. In fact, the UK economy is growing faster than most of the EU economies at the moment. Now, Brexit hasn't happened yet, so I can't sit here and say that it's all going to be, the land is going to be flowing with milk and honey. But I see no reason for the kind of despair and despondency that we hear constantly from people in the media. Except you, Issa.
Some comments coming in. Ian, Ian's talking a lot of nonsense. I'm sure he will disagree with you. Alexander Harrison, Britain needs to focus on its own problems. Diane, note, Trump will be out soon. There's always been a good relationship with the UK and the US. This special relationship will work with Brexit. And Becky Lucas will be America first on everything. UK should take her own destiny in her hands. And I agree that Trump himself is the risk. Do keep sending us your comments. Do tweet the panel too. Thank you very much for watching CNN Talk. I'll be back tomorrow. Bye-bye.